and welcome to episode 3 of the CHSG History Podcast. I'm Annabelle.
I'm Kalechi, and today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the French Revolution, the 11-year upheaval that inspired a new era, and looking at the Black Death, the plague that killed millions.
I am Noxa. We will also be looking at amoxicillin and penicillin, along with many more interesting topics. One might even be for us.
Well, let's look at our first section, antibiotics, our modern-day saviour.
Hello everyone, welcome to our podcast. Today we are going to talk about revolutionary medical inventions. It's all about amazing antibiotics and how they changed the world.
Indeed, that is right. But did you know making mistakes can be helpful? Well, that's how penicillin was discovered.
Yes, it's estimated that penicillin has saved over 200 million lives globally since it became widely available in the 1940s. This includes lives saved during the World War II as well as in civilian populations from infections that were once deadly.
Penicillin's roots go all the way back to 1928. It was the first true antibiotic discovered by Scottish bacteriologist Alexander Fleming.
Fleming was experimenting with Staphylococcus bacteria in a petri dish. One day he left a culture plate on his workbench and went on a vacation to Scotland.
When he returned, he noticed something unusual. Mould had grown on the dish, and the bacteria surrounding it had been destroyed.
He recognized the mould as belonging to the Penicillium genus.
This intrigued him, and upon further research, he realized that the mould released a substance that killed the bacteria around it, as it had powerful antibacterial properties.
Its discovery marked the beginning of the antibiotic era, revolutionizing medicine and paving the way for the development of other antibiotics.
Yes, this was life-changing, as before the discovery of penicillin, life was significantly more difficult, particularly in terms of treating infections.
How so?
There was an increased risk for surgery, as well as limited treatment options and high mortality rates. This was due to the lack of knowledge about antibiotics.
Wait, is it true that amoxicillin came out of penicillin?
Yes, that's right.
So, did Fleming discover amoxicillin as well?
No, it was actually discovered by Herbert A.S. and George B.
At Beecham Research Laboratories in 1972, the discovery of amoxicillin was part of efforts to develop more effective antibiotics based on the structure of penicillin.
What's the difference?
Penicillin typically requires more frequent dosing compared to amoxicillin. Amoxicillin is used for a wider range of infections,
such as ear infections, sinusitis, bronchitis, and urinary tract infection.
Amoxicillin is a semi-synthetic derivative of penicillin with slightly modified structures that enhance its properties.
Do they have any similarities?
Amoxicillin and penicillin are both antibiotics in the penicillin class of drugs, as they have the beta-lactam rings. This means they share a common structure and mechanism of action. They are used to treat bacterial infections as well. In summary, amoxicillin is a new antibiotic that was derived from penicillin to offer enhanced effectiveness, particularly against a broader range of bacteria.
That's interesting, but they can't all be good, can they? There must be some side effects.
Both drugs can cause allergic reactions, including rashes, hives, and anaphylaxis in sensitive individuals.
Amoxicillin may cause a non-allergic rash, especially in children with viral infections.
Even though they have a couple severe side effects, they still take a significant role in the medical community, especially amoxicillin.
Overall, amoxicillin has a greater impact on day-to-day life compared to penicillin, due to its improved effectiveness.
And that wraps up today's episode of Amazing Antibiotics. We hope you found it interesting. For more brilliant podcasts, make sure to subscribe and tune in next time. See you soon. Sanvi and Rebecca signing off.
Now we know that many of you enjoyed our recent episode on Catherine the Great, Empress of Russia. If you did then, you would love what's coming up next. That's right, because it's time for the next installment in our series on Russian Tsars. This time, our team is focusing on Alexander I.
He's perhaps best known for defeating Napoleon. There is much more to Alexander than just that. His story is full of twists.
Let's join the team to explore the life and legacy of Alexander I, a Tsar who left a real mark on Russia and the world.
Hello and welcome back to our Russian Despot series. Today we'll be looking at the grandson of our previous remarkable woman, Catherine the Great.
That's right, Alexander I, today's autocrat, was the Tsar of Russia between 1801 and 1825. Can you tell us a bit more about his background?
His father was Tsar Paul I, and his attitudes differed greatly from those of his mother and son. Paul and Alexander's relationship was strained to the point where Alexander did not oppose a plot to force his father's abdication, provided his life be spared.
This didn't quite go to plan. Paul I was strangled to death in 1801, casting a pall of guilt over Alexander's early years as Tsar, as he felt he had committed both patricide, the murder of his own father, and regicide, the killing of a king.
Bit harsh.
Family rivalry seemed to play a big role in Tsarist politics. Remember, Catherine deposed her own husband too.
That's true, and that's not where the similarities between Catherine the Great and Alexander I ended. She had a great influence on his childhood and was a role model for Alexander, in contrast to his father, whom he feared. She also employed his tutor, Frederick Caesar de la Harpe, contributing to his liberal progressive attitude.
Well, it definitely worked. Alexander claimed he wanted to rule in the spirit and according to the heart of his grandmother. In fact, some of his first edicts as a ruler were to reverse some of his father's policies and restore the Russia his grandmother had envisioned.
Can you give us some examples?
Absolutely. Some of these edicts included reinstating officers and officials that had been removed by Paul I, granting amnesty to political prisoners, reopening borders, and excessive police powers being restricted.
This all sounds very liberal. He kept some conservatism too, though, right?
As a Russian Tsar, that's part of the job description. He chaired a new committee, the Committee of Friends, who were interested in maintaining citizens' rights, but kept this secret, while at the same time creating a conservative council allowing him to maintain contact with the high nobility.
And another integral part of Imperial Russia, serfdom, a state of effective enslavement of peasants to their landowners. What were Alexander's policies concerning that?
Similarly to his grandmother, he sought to improve conditions for serfs. However, opposition from nobles made this difficult.
True enough, he only succeeded in banning the announcement of selling serfs and granted ordinary people the right to buy land without serfs. He then encouraged nobles to free their serfs who would buy a parcel of land granted to them.
Unfortunately, the nobility were reluctant to do this, and little more than 0.5% of the serf population were freed this way during his reign.
However, he did manage to abolish serfdom in places where nobles were more understanding, such as Baltic provinces, but for the most part his efforts concerning serfdom were ineffective.
You'd think that peasants' lives would have improved somewhat thanks to these policies, but that wasn't the case for those that were conscripted. Alexander created military settlements at his borders to reassign farmers as soldiers, with the intent of allowing them to remain with their families. Despite seeming benevolent on the surface, this was predominantly to reduce state expenditure, as farming soldiers would be self-sufficient and create a zone of strategic protection. These colonies were training camps of inhumane discipline, children beginning military schooling at age 7, later changed to 10, and joining military units at 18. Living conditions were cramped, and physical punishment was common. These grueling military settlements represented almost a third of the army.
This was especially important as Alexander's reign was during the turbulent period of the Napoleonic Wars.
Yes, and the Tsar had a complicated history with Napoleon. Can you tell us how this started out?
The two leaders began as allies, their secret agreement resulting in the peace treaty of Luneville. It was suggested that Russia and France carry out a common intervention in the east and share Turkey between them. However, it seems that Alexander had reconsidered his alliance with Napoleon and refused. He went on to form an anti-French coalition with Britain and Austria.
After a French victory against Austria, this brought into question maintaining Turkey. Turkey forced Alexander to declare war on France. After a series of conflicts, they signed the Treaty of Tilsit. But how did they become enemies again after this?
Good question. This was caused by diverging political interests such as the reconstruction of Poland and Alexander continuing trade with French enemies such as Britain. France ended up invading Russia in 1812.
Several conflicts, such as the Battle of Borodino, inflicted heavy casualties on both sides. However, Napoleon retreated when the Russian winter began to approach. Alexander's tactic of withdrawing further and further, destroying anything that may be useful to the French army in terms of supplies, made the prospect of weathering the winter a grim one.
After Napoleon's invasion, Alexander formed an alliance with Prussia and Austria and urged his allies not to sign a single peace treaty with Napoleon. Defeated, the self-proclaimed emperor was forced to abdicate, but Alexander's influence on European powers was hardly over.
Yes, Alexander then played an instrumental role in the Vienna Congress, influencing the establishment of an independent Poland and the development of the Holy Alliance between Austria, Prussia and Russia.
So essentially, France and Russia were frenemies until 1812 invasion when things got personal.
So, to summarise, why would we say that Alexander I's reign was a significant one?
Alexander's reign affected both the inner workings of his country and the power balance of the entirety of Europe. His reforms and more despotic policies impacted the life of his subjects greatly, for better or worse. His place on the military and political playfield of Europe was also incredibly significant, as he greatly contributed to the end of the Napoleonic Wars and the allocation of power in Europe that followed.
Excellent. That's all from us until next time, when we'll explore the first Russian monarch to claim the title Tsar, Ivan the Terrible.
Now it's time to turn back the clock to ancient Greece, where mythology was woven into everyday life. You've probably heard of Zeus, Athena and Apollo, but how much do you really know about them?
In this segment, we're uncovering surprising stories and little known facts about the Greek gods. Things that might just change the way you see about these legendary figures.
So whether you're a mythology enthusiast or just curious, get ready to meet the gods like you've never seen them before. Let's dive in.
Just imagine one day having a horrible headache, so bad that your son smashes your skull open with a hammer. Then, from your head, your daughter is born. Just imagine the sheer horror of having one more child.
Hello and welcome to the Art in the podcast.
I hope you're ready for today's facts,
Which are sure to send lightning bolts through your head at the shock. And make your head feel like it's fighting a war between curiosity and interest.
For today's subject is
5 facts you probably didn't know about the Greek gods. I'm Ace.
I'm Ellie.
I'm Mel.
and I'm Dora.
And welcome to this glorious slot in the podcast.
So Ace, I heard you've been wanting to do a slot like this for a while.
Absolutely.
He hasn't stopped talking about it throughout the last few months.
It's exhausting.
Ace, what were you talking about earlier about the headache? How is that related to the Greek gods?
I'm glad you asked me that. It's to do with our first fact, because it's how Athena came into the world.
Basically, one day Zeus found out that his second-born with Metis would be a son and would end up being more powerful than him and overthrow him, just like he had done with his own father, Cronus.
So he decided to play a game with Metis, asking her to turn into the smallest things possible.
She then turned into a fly. Zeus told her to turn into something smaller, and she turned into a water droplet. And Zeus then swallowed her.
So he swallowed his own wife, and the ancient Greeks were okay with that.
I guess so.
Anyways, Zeus got a horrible headache, so bad that his son Hephaestus got a hammer and cracked his head open.
Then, boom, out came Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom, fully grown and armed.
No wonder Athena was so brave. That must have been a very scary way to come into the world. So I heard you two talking about Apollo and a few other Greek gods' sexualities. Care to explain?
Yeah, fact 2 was the fact that Apollo was bisexual, and many other gods.
He didn't seem to care about his lover's gender. And to put on to that, the Greeks were completely fine with the LGBTQIA, as it seemed to be a completely normal thing to them.
That's why I like the Greeks the most.
So, was Apollo the only one?
No, there were many other LGBTQIA plus Greek gods.
Some others include Zeus, Achilles, Narcissus, and a divine hero, Chrysippus of Pisa.
We were a mixture of surprise and happiness when we found out Apollo's fact, and even more surprised to find out there were many more.
Okay, who were Apollo's male lovers then?
Well, he had many. Around 13 from what we found.
That's a lot.
Yep, he had a lot. He had more lovers than Zeus had wives.
His lovers included Admetus of Pherae, Adonis, Boreas, Hymen,
Brancus, Carnus, Cinerus, Cyparissus,
Helenus, Hippolytus, Hyacinth, Lepix, and Phoebus.
Sorry to move away from Apollo, but what did Zeus do to Prometheus?
Fact number 3, Prometheus's punishment. He stole fire from the gods to give to the humans.
Bro really took, "This girl is on fire!" too far.
So, for punishment for stealing the sacred flame was true betrayal. His own cousin, Zeus, stuck poor Prometheus to Mount Olympus.
Then each day, an eagle came to eat his liver, which grew back every day until Heracles slayed the eagle with Zeus's permission to help him break free of his punishment.
The eagle really said, "I have your liver!"
What? His liver? Mel!
Sorry, couldn't resist.
Okay, anyways, Aura, are you finding these facts interesting so far?
Yep. I want to know about fact 4, please.
This is Ace's favorite one. I wonder why.
Fact 4. How people were sent to the underworld.
So how were people sent to the Wonderworld?
Well, one of the ways would be that it would be a completely normal day for them. And then, when they went to sleep, the god Hypnos would collect them and send them to the underworld.
Also, there were multiple parts of the underworld.
2 of the parts were Elysium, a paradise for the good, and Tartarus, a black pit for the bad.
I'm intrigued. What was the other way people were sent to the underworld?
Right, the other way people were sent to the underworld was after the whole Pandora's box incident, when diseases and suffering were released into the world. Death suddenly became an awful experience.
And after the person had died, people would place a coin called an obol under the body's tongue to pay the ferryman. Charon.
Wait, so what would happen if the coin wasn't placed under their tongue and they couldn't pay the coin?
Well, they were forced to wander the banks of the river Styx for 100 years before they could finally cross the river.
Cool. What about the last fact?
Fact 5. Eos, Zeus, and Tithonus.
One day, the prince of Troy, Tithonus, and the goddess of dawn, Eos, doing anything a goddess would do, with such a gracious name and a beautiful time of day she owned, and abducted Tithonus. They did fall in love though.
Talk about forbidden romance. Anyways, soon, Eos begged Zeus for Tithonus to be given immortality.
However, she forgot eternal youth to go with it.
He aged so much that he shriveled up into an old piping husk.
Eos, you had one job.
Tithonus became the god of insects. If you guys wanted to know. Anyways,
We hoped you enjoyed our slot in the podcast.
If you did, be sure to tune in next time.
where we will discuss
Another
mystery
or subject.
in history.
Wow, Wow, I learnt so much from that.
Don't forget to boast to your friends about everything you now know.
I'll totally boast about everything I know.
What's next?
It appears we have the French Revolution next, the dethroning that caused the French Revolutionary Wars.
Let's get into it.
Hi, I'm your host Sarah, and today we'll be looking at the iconic French Revolution with Sophia and Pavna.
Hi!
So, what can you tell me about it?
It began in 1789 and ended in 1799.
It was the cause of the Napoleonic War, World War I and World War II.
Well, I don't think the people were involved at all. It was a political war, wasn't it?
It was not a political war. It was a dethroning because the people were upset that they were starving, breaking their backs in the field, whilst the rich and royals were partying all night and the peasants were outraged.
Oh, that's interesting. But my main question is, who was the king and the queen at that time?
They were Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette.
Queen Marie had 4 kids, Marie and Teresa Charlotte.
Louis, Joseph, Xavier, Francois.
Louis XVII.
And Sophie Helen Beatrice.
One of the most iconic lines was "Let them eat cake."
Obviously, it's so iconic, we all know that.
But I bet you didn't know that she never said it.
What? Yeah, there's no proof she did say it. And did you know that Queen Marie made her hair into a boat?
That is so strange. Is there anything else?
And is it true that 10,000 African slaves were freed during the Revolution?
Yeah, it's true.
During the Civil War, 170,000 innocent people died, and the Jacobins nearly arrested 30,000 innocent civilians.
Louis XIV was called the Grand Sequel, the Great Century.
That's a lot of facts. I don't think I can remember anything.
There's still more.
King Louis XVI had a slight lock and key problem.
What?
It's reported he practiced as an amateur locksmith.
Oh, now I understand. There's so much more we could discuss, but that will take forever.
So, I guess that's it.
Bye! See you next time!
Next up, we're tackling one of history's most infamous events, the Black Death. It's often described as a catastrophic plague that wiped out millions across Europe.
But was it truly the unparalleled disaster we've been taught about, or was there more to the story than meets the eye?
Join us as we dig into the facts. Join us as we dig into some facts, bust the myths, and explore the surprising ways this pandemic shaped the world.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Disasters from the Past. I'm your host, Kalechi, and I'm here with my 2 fellow historians, Sienna
Hey.
and Annabelle.
Hi.
Today we're going to be talking about, dun dun dun, the Black Death.
Fire away.
What was the Black Death?
The Black Death was a pandemic that ravaged Europe between the early mid-1300s. The Black Death is believed to have been the result of plague, an infectious fever.
How did it arrive in England?
It came over on ships from France and Germany, as well as Italy, which carried 3 infected rats with the bacterium Yersinia pestis.
I've never heard of that before. What is it?
Yersinia pestis is spread when fleas drink the blood of infected rats.
Wow, that's horrible. I wonder what the symptoms are.
Well, there are many. They included fever, chills, vomiting, diarrhoea, terrible aches, and pain along the postural buboes.
Pardon?
A bubo is a swollen lymph, the swelling that was on many plague victims.
Terrible. Well, now I want to know, how was the Black Death treated?
The treatments could involve the draining of blood and fluids from buboes.
Oh, I see. Well, how come the doctors didn't get it?
The reason is interesting. Doctors believe the plague was airborne, which is mostly wrong. Most historians now think the plague was spread through contact. Hundreds of years later, doctors still made this mistake. They wore long beak-shaped masks stuffed with lavender to mask the spell, but their wax suits defending them.
Well, was the Black Death bad or good?
I believe that it was bad because around 50 million people died, including workers, which affected many families emotionally and financially.
However, there were beneficial effects, such as increased wages for working peasants and improvements in medicine.
But ultimately, it caused the deaths of around 50 million people, and the increased grief and constant riots made a grim impact.
I guess I could agree there were some bad effects.
Well, there are both good and bad effects. That's all from us today. See you next time for more great disasters.
Before we go, do you know that though the disease was originally called the Great Mortality and the Great Pestilence, the name Black Death was eventually adopted because of the black boils which derive their colour from dry blood under the skin caused by internal bleeding.
Interesting. Well, that's all from us today. Thanks for listening, and tune in next time for more great disasters from the past.
Bye.
You learn something new every day. Now I know that Yersinia pestis spreads when fleas drink the blood of infected rats. What did you like from the antibiotics topic, Annabelle?
Who knew that medicine could shape our world and help multiple lives every single day?
Yes, it's wild.
Who knew that Queen Marie made her hair into a boat?
I certainly didn't.
Well, that's all from us today.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
And tune in next time for more facts about Anne Boleyn, the War of Roses and civil rights in the USA.
Bye.